This is Baltimore, where America's historic port city has devolved into a patchwork of abandoned industrial sites, crime-ridden housing projects, and desperate attempts at gentrification that only highlight the surrounding devastation. The harbor that once welcomed millions of immigrants and shipped goods worldwide now serves primarily as a tourist attraction, while the working-class neighborhoods that built this city's character have been systematically demolished or left to decay. Population flight has left entire sections looking like ghost towns, with more people leaving each year than arriving. But this was Baltimore. The year is 1814. British warships bombard Fort McHenry in a relentless overnight assault. As dawn breaks, a young lawyer named Francis Scott Key gazes through clearing smoke to see the American flag still waving defiantly. Inspired, he pens what will become our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, cementing Baltimore's place in American identity. This moment of patriotic triumph wasn't an anomaly, but a reflection of Baltimore's pivotal role in early America. By the early 19th century, Baltimore had established itself as the nation's second-largest port, a bustling gateway that welcomed millions of European immigrants seeking new lives in the Promised Land. The city's natural deep-water harbor positioned it perfectly at the intersection of international shipping and America's expanding interior. Ships arrived laden with manufactured goods, raw materials, and hopeful faces from across the Atlantic. They departed carrying American grain, tobacco, and manufactured products to markets worldwide. In 1827, Baltimore's significance to American commerce reached new heights with the groundbreaking of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, America's first commercial railroad. The B&O connected the port to western territories, creating a vital artery for goods and people moving between the heartland and the coast. Suddenly, Baltimore wasn't just a maritime hub, but the crucial nexus between sea and land transportation networks. The waterfront hummed with constant activity. Stevedores loaded and unloaded cargo from dawn to dusk. Shipwrights constructed magnificent vessels in yards that stretched along the harbor. Sailors from 100 nations mingled in taverns and boarding houses. The maritime industry didn't just employ thousands. It defined the city's character. Neighborhoods like Fells Point, Canton, and Locust Point grew organically around this maritime economy. Their distinctive row houses with marble steps, a uniquely Baltimore architectural feature, housed generations of working families. These weren't just residential areas, but cohesive communities where neighbors knew each other, children played in the streets, and local businesses thrived serving their immediate surroundings. As the 19th century progressed, Baltimore's industrial base diversified beyond shipping. Bethlehem Steel established its massive Sparrows Point mill in 1887, eventually becoming the largest steel manufacturing facility in the world. At its peak, Sparrows Point employed over 30,000 workers with good union wages that supported middle-class lifestyles. The mill produced steel for everything from World War II Liberty ships to the Golden Gate Bridge. The city's economic vitality fostered rich cultural traditions. Ethnic enclaves flourished, German brewers in East Baltimore, Jewish merchants along Lombard Street, Polish communities in Fells Point, Italian neighborhoods in Little Italy. Each group brought distinct traditions, foods, and celebrations that together created Baltimore's unique cultural tapestry. Education and medicine also flourished. Johns Hopkins University, established in 1876, pioneered modern medical education and research. The Peabody Institute cultivated musical excellence. These institutions reflected Baltimore's ambition to be not just an industrial powerhouse, but a center of knowledge and culture. Commercial districts buzzed with activity. Pennsylvania Avenue featured renowned theaters and jazz clubs where legends like Billie Holiday and Cab Calloway performed. Lexington Market, founded in 1782, offered farm-fresh produce and local specialties. Eastern Avenue storefronts catered to working families with everything from hardware to haberdashery. The mid-20th century marked Baltimore's population peak. Nearly 1 million residents called the city home in 1950. Neighborhoods functioned as self-contained villages within the larger urban framework. Most people could walk to work, school, church, and shopping. Extended families often lived within blocks of each other, creating multi-generational community bonds that provided social safety nets and cultural continuity. This was Baltimore in its prime, a vibrant industrial city where manufacturing Maritime commerce and human ingenuity created prosperity shared across class and ethnic lines. A place of distinctive neighborhoods, strong community institutions, and authentic local character. A city that worked. The unraveling began gradually, then accelerated with devastating speed. By the late 1950s, federal transportation policy prioritized highways over public transit. The 1956 Federal Aid Highway Act unleashed a concrete tsunami on America's cities. Baltimore was not spared. Interstate 95 carved through established neighborhoods on the east side. The planned East-West Expressway threatened to demolish thousands of homes across historic neighborhoods like Fells Point and Federal Hill. These highway projects didn't just destroy physical buildings. They severed the invisible connections that made communities function. Corner stores lost customers when pedestrian routes were blocked. Neighbors became strangers when streets no longer connected. The fabric of daily life frayed as the automobile became prioritized over human interaction. Meanwhile, federal housing policies encouraged suburban expansion while effectively abandoning inner cities. The GI Bill and FHA loans made new suburban homes accessible to returning World War II veterans, provided they were white. Redlining practices systematically denied similar opportunities to black families, concentrating them in neighborhoods that were simultaneously denied investment. The 1968 riots following Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination accelerated white flight already in progress. Over 1,000 businesses were damaged or destroyed. Property values plummeted. Those with means, predominantly white families, fled to Baltimore County and beyond. Between 1950 and 1980, Baltimore lost over 200,000 residents, most of them middle-class taxpayers and consumers who had supported local businesses and institutions. As residents departed, the commercial corridors that had served them withered. The bustling shopping districts along Howard Street, Pennsylvania Avenue, and Gay Street emptied out. Department stores that had been civic institutions, Hutzler's, Hochschild Kohn, Stewart's, closed their doors. Each closure eliminated jobs and removed another reason for people to come downtown. The physical environment reflected this economic retreat. Once proud commercial buildings were poorly maintained, then abandoned. Some were demolished for parking lots to serve commuters who drove in from the suburbs, worked their hours, and left again, contributing little to the urban environment they passed through. Industrial decline hit Baltimore particularly hard. The containerization revolution in shipping rendered Baltimore's traditional port facilities obsolete. The city's shallow harbor couldn't accommodate modern container ships, and much of the cargo business shifted to deeper ports like Norfolk. Longshoremen jobs that had supported generations of families disappeared. Manufacturing followed a similar trajectory. Bethlehem Steel's Sparrows Point plant, once employing 30,000 workers, began a long, agonizing decline in the 1970s. Foreign competition, management failures, and changing technologies steadily eroded the workforce. The final closure in 2012 marked the end of an era. No longer would Baltimore's port send American-made steel to markets worldwide. Other manufacturers suffered similar fates. Western Electric, General Motors, Koppers, American Can, and dozens of smaller firms either closed entirely or drastically reduced operations. Each closure eliminated not just direct jobs, but positions at suppliers, local restaurants, and service businesses that had catered to industrial workers. The city government responded with increasingly desperate attempts at urban renewal. In the 1960s and 1970s, planners razed entire city blocks, demolishing historic buildings that could have been rehabilitated. Public housing projects concentrated poverty in high-rise towers that quickly became unsafe and unmanageable. The infamous Lexington Terrace, Lafayette Courts, and Flag House Courts projects became symbols of failed urban policy. By the 1980s, crack cocaine had devastated already vulnerable communities. The war on drugs filled prisons with nonviolent offenders, removing fathers and brothers from families that needed them. Baltimore's murder rate soared to levels that earned it the grim nickname Bodymore, Murderland. The education system, starved of resources as the tax base shrank, failed to prepare students for the changing economy. Baltimore schools became among the nation's worst performing, further driving middle-class families to the suburbs or private education. This created a vicious cycle. Poor schools led to population loss, which reduced the tax base, which further undermined educational quality. Political leadership proved unequal to these challenges. Corruption scandals plagued City Hall. Police departments became increasingly disconnected from the communities they served. Public services deteriorated as budget shortfalls became chronic. Infrastructure maintenance was deferred, then deferred again, until water main breaks, potholes, and collapsing vacant buildings became commonplace. The Inner Harbor redevelopment in the 1980s created a tourist bubble that city leaders celebrated as revitalization. But the gleaming pavilions of Harbor Place primarily created low-wage service jobs. The economic benefits rarely reached the neighborhoods most in need. Tourists could visit the National Aquarium and harbor attractions without ever seeing the devastating reality just blocks away. The numbers tell a stark story. Baltimore's population plummeted from 949,708 in 1950 to just 585,708 in 2020, a loss of nearly 40% of its residents. This decline ranks among the steepest of any major American city. Property abandonment has reached catastrophic levels. Over 16,000 buildings sit vacant, many of them architecturally significant row houses that once housed thriving families. Entire blocks feature more empty structures than occupied ones. In some neighborhoods, vacancy rates exceed 40%. Crime statistics reveal Baltimore's tragic distinction as one of America's most dangerous cities. In 2019, the city recorded 348 homicides, a per capita murder rate more than 10 times the national average. For comparison, New York City, with 14 times Baltimore's population, had fewer total homicides. Economic indicators show profound disparity. The median household income hovers around $50,000, significantly below the national average, despite Baltimore's location in one of America's wealthiest metropolitan regions. In some neighborhoods, unemployment exceeds 20%, even during periods of national economic growth. Educational outcomes remain dismal. Only 20% of Baltimore public school students read at grade level. The high school graduation rate, while improved in recent years, still lags behind national averages. These statistics represent thousands of young people entering adulthood without the skills needed for economic self-sufficiency. Life expectancy varies dramatically by neighborhood. Residents of Roland Park, an affluent area, can expect to live to 84. Just a few miles away in Sandtown, Winchester, life expectancy is just 66 years, a disparity of 18 years within the same small city. The physical transformation is equally stark. Aerial photographs from the 1950s show dense, intact neighborhoods with few vacant lots. Today, those same neighborhoods resemble a patchwork quilt of occupied buildings, vacant structures, and empty lots where buildings have been demolished. Once vibrant commercial corridors stand largely empty. Pennsylvania Avenue, the heart of Baltimore's historic African-American business and entertainment district, now features more boarded storefronts than active businesses. The magnificent theaters where jazz legends once performed are now either demolished or in advanced decay. Even the successful Inner Harbor redevelopment has begun to falter. Harbor Place, once the crown jewel of Baltimore's tourism economy, fell into receivership in 2019. Retailers have steadily abandoned the pavilions that once symbolized Baltimore's Renaissance. The harborfront remains popular with visitors, but the economic model that sustained it for decades has collapsed. Infrastructure decay is visible everywhere. Water main breaks occur with alarming frequency in a system with pipes dating back to the 19th century. Streets display the neglect of decades of deferred maintenance. Public facilities like recreation centers and libraries operate with reduced hours or closed entirely due to budget constraints. Perhaps most telling are the thousands of historic row houses, the architectural signature of Baltimore, that stand vacant and deteriorating. These buildings, with their distinctive marble steps and ornate facades, represent craftsmanship rarely seen in modern construction. Many could be rehabilitated, but the economic fundamentals don't justify the investment in neighborhoods where property values remain depressed. The contrast between Baltimore's remaining wealthy enclaves and its struggling neighborhoods couldn't be more pronounced. In Roland Park, Guilford, and similar areas, grand homes sit on tree-lined streets. Just blocks away in Greenmount West or Broadway East, abandoned buildings with collapsed roofs and vacant lots define the landscape. This transformation didn't occur naturally or inevitably. It resulted from specific policy choices, economic shifts, and social changes that collectively hollowed out what had been a functional, if imperfect, urban ecosystem. Baltimore's decline forces us to confront fundamental questions about how we value our cities and the communities within them. What happened here wasn't simply economic evolution, but the result of choices, conscious and unconscious, about what matters in urban development. The city's story demonstrates what happens when we prioritize new development over preservation, when we value highways over neighborhoods, when we see cities as obstacles to pass through rather than places to nurture and inhabit. The devastation visible in so many Baltimore neighborhoods wasn't inevitable. It resulted from policies that systematically devalued urban life and the people who called the city home. We must recognize that cities aren't just economic engines, but repositories of culture, community, and human connection. When we allow historic neighborhoods to decay, we lose more than buildings. We lose the intangible networks of relationships and traditions that give places meaning. The distinctive marble steps of Baltimore row houses don't just represent architectural detail. They embody generations of residents who scrubbed those steps weekly as a matter of civic pride. Baltimore's experience offers lessons about what truly makes cities viable. Successful urban environments require mixed-use neighborhoods where people can live, work, shop, and socialize within walkable distances. They need transportation systems that connect rather than divide communities. They thrive on diversity of people, housing types, businesses, and institutions that creates resilience against economic shocks. The path forward requires acknowledging past mistakes without surrendering to despair. Baltimore still possesses remarkable assets: a stunning waterfront, world-class educational and medical institutions, a rich architectural heritage, and proximity to Washington, D.C. Most importantly, it has communities of residents who remain deeply committed to their neighborhoods despite decades of disinvestment. True revitalization must build on these existing strengths rather than imposing development models that have failed elsewhere. It means investing in the distinctive character that makes Baltimore unique, not chasing generic urban renewal formulas. It requires addressing the systemic inequities that have concentrated poverty and disadvantage in certain neighborhoods while others prosper. As we reflect on Baltimore's journey from maritime powerhouse to struggling post-industrial city, we confront the central question of urban development. What are cities for? Are they simply economic zones to be abandoned when no longer profitable? Or are they irreplaceable cultural landscapes where human connections and shared history create value beyond market measures? The answer to this question will determine not just Baltimore's future, but the fate of countless communities facing similar challenges across America. We can continue treating cities as disposable assets, or we can recognize their irreplaceable value and commit to nurturing the unique qualities that make them worth saving. Baltimore's story isn't finished. Despite decades of decline, pockets of revival show what's possible when people reinvest in urban neighborhoods. The challenge lies in extending that revival to communities that have been systematically excluded from previous renewal efforts. True success will be measured not by tourist dollars or luxury condos, but by whether longtime residents can share in whatever renaissance emerges. The most profound lesson from Baltimore's decline is that urban fabric, once torn, is extraordinarily difficult to repair. The neighborhoods, commercial districts, and industrial areas that define Baltimore's character evolved organically over generations. They represented not just physical infrastructure, but social capital built through countless human interactions. When we allow such environments to deteriorate beyond repair, we lose something that cannot be replicated through even the most well-intentioned development plans. Baltimore stands as both warning and possibility, a testament to the devastating consequences of abandonment and a reminder that authentic urban revival must honor the history, architecture, and communities that give cities their soul. Baltimore's devastating transformation reveals how quickly prosperity can vanish when cities abandon their historical foundations. This isn't just Baltimore's story. It's a warning for every American city. What do we truly value in our communities? The answer determines our urban future. Do you agree this decline was preventable? Subscribe now to explore more fallen American cities next week.